guys, so today I want to talk about intermittent fasting, some of the claims and my experience with it. And so we have my high-tech whiteboard back today to help explain. And as a lot of you know, intermittent fasting isn't a new concept. It's been around for a very long time. I got into it in 2011 when Martin Berkhan started putting out a lot of information on it, and it's kind of had a resurgence recently, a lot of popularity. And so I kind of want to go over some of the claims and, like I said, the reality, at least in my experience and many others, and what the studies are showing. And so, the main claim that I think the reason a lot of people get into it is because they want to talk about improved fat loss. They say fasting is the best way to lose fat, and it's more effective than other diets at doing so. Another claim, actually I've seen a few times, a little bit contradictory, is improved muscle mass. And like I said, that sounds a little odd considering you're going so long without eating, but they do mention that in some claims as well. Improved health is another big one you see, and you'll see now a lot of people are throwing around the term autophagy, which is basically when the body gets rid of cells that aren't functioning properly anymore. And then, of course, you have the group with the moral superiority, where they will tell you that intermittent fasting will get you the perfect body, along with women and riches and anything else that you could want. So I want to cover all this today. When you actually step back and look at what the studies show, it doesn't necessarily fall in line with this. So I'm just going to give my experience back, like I said, when I first started, it was 2011. So that was my sophomore year of college at the time. And the previous year, I had put on about 7 pounds of muscle. So, of course, I'm still kind of going through the hormonal changes at that age and making still good progress. So I had gained, like I said, at the same body fat roughly, I had bulked up and then cut down, and I netted 7 pounds my freshman year of college. My sophomore year of college is when I started intermittent fasting. I figured I'll give it a shot. I did the standard 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. And that year, I actually gained 8 pounds of lean body mass. Again, bulking up about 25 pounds and then dieting back down to a similar body fat. Now, I did have a coach at that time, and so I can't necessarily say, I'm not looking at that in 8 pounds versus 7 pounds. It's such a small difference there. I don't think you can look at that and say, well, clearly intermittent fasting helped there. I think it just was more or less the same. And I continued to make good progress at that age. At that point, I was about 20 years old, so naturally I'm going to be making good progress then. But what I really noticed and what I loved about it was the convenience, because having done this for the previous 8 years and literally eating every 2 to 3 hours and freaking out if I was out and I didn't have food with me, that was a huge paradigm shift to realize that I could go a long time without eating. And literally, my freshman year, I would bring protein shakes out with me. If there was a party, I would bring food because I was just completely obsessed with it, and I thought I needed to do that. So once I started doing this, I finished my last meal by about 5 o'clock, and I could just go out and hang out with friends, and I didn't have to worry about it. And that, to me, is by far the best part of intermittent fasting, is that it seems to be that you can just go an extended period of time without eating, without any real detriment to results. So that right there, I think, is great for, if you're working, if you're in school, anything like that, just be able to kind of get some of your life back. Down here, I talk about increased productivity. It kind of falls in line with that, because instead of having to make 6 meals a day, I could make 3, and I had all that time to get work done. A lot of people will do intermittent fasting the other way around, where they will fast in the morning and then they will eat the latter half of the day. That's great because, at least for me and many others, when you get up and you haven't eaten yet, you just kind of feel more alert. And so that will help productivity, and you just don't have to be bogged down with making food. Ease of use and dieting, that kind of ties into that. But again, it just makes it very simple to go about your day. And so I would say that if you're dieting and you don't have to deal with meal prepping as much, all three of these kind of fall together. And then the time satiety, that one, I say timed because some studies actually show increased hunger with intermittent fasting. When they look at the net amount of hunger throughout the day, there is a higher amount of hunger with the intermittent fasting group. That wasn't really my experience, but that is what I've seen a study show. So when I say time satiety, I mean that you can eat big meals at certain parts of the day. And so if you're dieting and you're on 1,800 calories and you're trying to spread that over 6 meals, 6 300 calorie meals, I mean, that's nothing. Even with tons of vegetables, it's nothing. But with intermittent fasting, and more, it's not even just intermittent fasting, but really just the 3 meals aspect, but even more so when you're cramming it into a smaller period of time, you can actually feel full. 2,000 calories isn't a ton for a guy like my size, around 200 pounds, but 2,000 calories in an 8-hour window is a decent amount. And if you do 500 calories, and then 1,000 calories, 1,000 calories can be a pretty big meal. So that can really help with the dieting aspect and feeling like you're satiated. Because if you're dieting for months on end and you just never feel full, that can be hard to deal with. And that kind of ties in with down here, I mentioned the better relationship with food. And there's a caveat there, that's very individual. So for me, that did result in a much better relationship with food, because it just, like I said before, it made me realize that it doesn't always have to be every 2 hours or every 3 hours or at this perfect timing. I could step back and live my life a little bit simpler. But not everybody has that experience. And for some people, they use intermittent fasting almost as an excuse to binge. And they keep pushing it further and further. And they try to determine, they try to see how far can I go without eating? Can I go 20 hours without eating and then just binge for 4 hours? Or they'll have 90% of their calories in one meal just so that they can stuff their face. And they might combine this with a flexible dieting approach, and so that this way they can fit in, 1,800 calories of junk food in one meal. And you do see that. Again, that wasn't my experience, thankfully, but you do see that happen, and people will try to justify poor eating behavior that way. Now, again, as far as the claims go, currently, the studies that we have show that fat loss is pretty much the same. That ultimately it's going to come down to calories primarily, and then protein is going to be a big determinant in whether that comes from fat or muscle. But fat loss, from what we're seeing, as long as calories are matched, not any better. Muscle mass, I haven't seen too much legitimate info that there would be an increase in muscle mass. I know that there is some theoretical, there's an increase in GH production and things like that, but it doesn't seem to really pan out that way. Having said that, I will say that you do see people who will talk down on intermittent fasting and say they don't think that you can really build muscle on it, which to me is ridiculous, because I've done it. The first year I did it, I gained 8 pounds of muscle. Now, there's no way to know how much I would have gained if I didn't do intermittent fasting, but like I said, the year prior, I gained 7 pounds. So you certainly can build substantial amounts of muscle on intermittent fasting. Pretty much everything I gained after my freshman year of college, so probably about 25 pounds since then, has been mostly through intermittent fasting. The only time I don't do intermittent fasting is just if I need to eat so much food that it's just uncomfortable to eat it in that time period. But for the most part, just from a life convenience standpoint, I've generally stuck with that approach. So I would say, and I've also found that most of the people who say this have never done intermittent fasting. It's consistently coaches who just say, well, I just don't think it's ideal. And then that's fine. I'm not saying it's ideal for muscle mass either. But again, it really always seems to be people who haven't tried it. And I can guarantee you can put muscle on with intermittent fasting. Whether or not it's ideal, I can't say. It would seem logically that it wouldn't be, because you're going an extended period of time without food. But there's a lot of things that we assume based on, face validity, and that end up not being true later on. There's a lot of assumptions that we make, and it kind of seems to make sense, and then the data doesn't support it. And so this might be an instance of that. Health, anytime you decrease calories in these studies, you're going to see improved blood markers of health. Okay, so cholesterol is often going to go down. Acutely, actually, cholesterol can go up when somebody is in a deficit, but overall, it's going to go down. Blood sugar levels are going to go down. HbA1c is going to go down. So people see that the fasting protocols, and then they assume that's the health benefits are from the fasting, but they're not accounting for the fact that most of the time these people are in a calorie deficit, because again, that's the reason most people do fasting. Most people don't do what I did and try to bulk on, or gain muscle on a fasting protocol. They do it to lose weight. And so again, when you compare the health markers of people who just ate throughout the day compared to fasting, there seems to be no significant benefit. Now, we do have some preliminary studies showing some benefits of fasting and other types of fasting, 24-hour fast or even longer than that. I actually think that they probably will find some benefits to fasting in the future. but not to the extent that people are claiming, and not dramatically more than you would see just being in a calorie deficit. In general, eating less calories is going to be healthier for most people. And one other aspect about that is, even in terms of fasting or caloric restriction, more recent studies are showing that the caloric restriction leading to longevity isn't as clear cut as we thought. And so, there's tons of data now in different species showing that with a caloric restriction, there's an increased lifespan. And that's been shown, like I said, in a number of different animal models. However, I think it was Dr. Peter Attia talks about this, and he says, and he mentions that when two groups of monkeys were fed different diets, caloric restriction did help when they were eating ad libitum whatever foods. But when they were forced to eat what we would call like a healthy diet, still as much as they would want to eat, or just I think it was at maintenance, they didn't find that. They didn't find that the caloric restriction actually improved longevity. And so basically what that means is if you're eating a bunch of crap, then eating less crap is going to help. But if you're already eating, a very healthy diet and let's say normal amounts of calories, it might not be that beneficial to fast or to, do severe caloric restriction. And so I don't want to speculate too much on that because that is newer data. I'm sure more is going to come out about that in the future. But as of right now, I wouldn't hold out and do, crazy fasting protocols or crazy caloric restriction in the hopes that it's going to massively improve your health, unless you do need to lose weight, in which case the weight loss itself is what's going to lead to the increased health. So again, I do think there are definitely applications for intermittent fasting. I do intermittent fasting most of the time because it's so convenient and it's kind of giving my life back there rather than having to eat 6, 7, 8 meals a day. But if you're going to do it, understand why you're doing it, the reasons behind it, and how you can apply it correctly. Don't use it to binge or as an excuse for that. Don't think that you're getting these massive benefits if it doesn't work out for your lifestyle. Don't feel bad and think that you're not going to get results just from a normal, healthy, caloric restriction standard diet. So I want to touch on that today and kind of dispel some of the myths around that.